students. From today, I'm going to upload the videos, lecture videos on head and neck. And this question is, describe the scalp, SCALP. Describe the scalp under following heads. It is the extent of the scalp, layers of the scalp, blood supply and no supply of the scalp. Okay. Now, to begin with, I have to define what is scalp. Okay. And in introduction, let us learn what is the scalp. This is the soft tissue. Scalp is what? It is the soft tissue which covers the vault of the skull. Vault of the skull means the skull cape and the calvaria. Okay, that is the skull cape. Calvaria or the skull cap is the same thing, and it is nothing but the vault of the skull, the top view of the skull, which we have learned as the norma verticalis. That area is covered by the soft tissue, and that soft tissue which covers this skull cape is called as the scalp. So let me tell you about the skull cape or the scalp which it will be covering. And for this I will use this theme dissector, okay, in which I have just written this volume 3rd, which is about the dissection of the head, neck and brain. So I will be using some of this diagram from this book and will let you know that what is the bones which are covered by the scalp. Let us see, this is the norma frontalis, and here in the norma frontalis you can see that this is the glabella and this area is the superciliary arches just above the superior orbital margin, and this is the superciliary arches lies just deep to the eyebrows. So just remember this aspect, okay. Then I will tell you that on posterior aspect, this is the external occipital protuberance from where the superior nuchal line are extending, and then R-shaped faint lines are also going from superior, external occipital protuberance. These are called as the highest nuchal line, okay. And let us see this scalp, okay, as we see it from the lateral, this skull from the lateral side. You can see a faint line is going here, here, here and coming here. This is the superior temporal line. So this will be the lateral limit of the scalp, okay. So you have seen that the top view of the scalp which will show you, the top view of the skull which will show you the coronal suture and the sagittal suture, okay, sagittal suture. So once you have seen this skull cape or the calvaria, let me go to the extent, okay. So now you will better understand what is the extent of the scalp. Now the scalp extend, okay, from eyebrow, okay, in anteroposterior direction. It extend from eyebrows, okay, anteriorly, which are located anteriorly to that of the external occipital protuberance, to the external I have just shown you on the bone the external occipital protuberance and superior nuchal lines. So anteriorly it is eyebrows, and posteriorly this is extending up to the external occipital protuberance and superior nuchal line. This is anteroposterior extent of the soft tissue which is covering to the skull cap, that is called as the scalp. So this is anteroposterior extent of the scalp. On the side, this soft tissue which covers the skull cap or calvaria or the vault of the skull, on the right and left side it is just limiting to that of the superior temporal line. That means the scalp boundary is up to the superior temporal line. Some of the book will mention it also extending right up to the zygomatic arch on right and left side. But in true sense, the scalp is limited, okay, or extend laterally on right and left side up to the superior temporal line, which I have shown you in the skull, vault of the skull. Okay, so this is the extent. Okay, so you have understood what is the scalp. It is a soft tissue covering the skull cape, and its extent anteroposterior and on either side. Now let us come to this soft tissue. There are many layers which is covering to the skull cape. The soft tissue, it consists of many layers, and these are 5 layers. So the scalp consists of 5 layers, you may say, and from superficial to deep, these layers are named as this: skin. Deep to the skin will lie the superficial fascia, similar to anywhere else in the body. Deep to skin lies the superficial fascia, and then the third layer will be a muscle and a common tendon of this muscle. That will form the third layer of the scalp, occipitofrontalis muscle. It has 2 bellies. One is occipital belly, which is located posteriorly. Another is the frontal belly, which is located anteriorly towards the eyebrows. So this is the occipitofrontalis muscle, and in between the 2 belly there is a presence of a common tendon which is in the form of an aponeurosis. That's why this common tendon of between occipital and frontal bellies is called as epicranial aponeurosis. The 4th layer of the scalp is the loose areolar tissue, okay? And the 5th layer is the periosteum, which is here called as pericranium, covering to the flat bones of the skull. Where that means it is the bones here in the calvaria or the skull cape are frontal bone anteriorly, then on either side of the midline the parietal bone, and up to the superior nuchal line there is the squamous part of the occipital bone, okay, squamous part. So these many flat bones are forming, and the periosteum covering to these bones in the region of the scalp is called as pericranium. Okay, so these are the 5 layers, and I will just draw you these 5 layers layer by layer. Let us see here in this rough diagram which I have drawn with the pencil. This is the first layer, the skin. So I will draw the skin here, okay, and will keep on describing when I am drawing about the skin. The skin of the scalp is hairy. There are a lot of hair, okay, as it is on our head. Lot of hairs are present, and this skin is thick, not as thin as we get on the dorsum of the hand or any other places. The skin of the scalp is very thin, and it has lot of hair, okay, it has and since it is having lot of hair, the skin, there are the presence of the sebaceous gland which are associated with the hair follicle. So I have drawn the first layer, and this layer is the skin layer, okay. As I said that there are plenty of the hairs, so it will contain lots of the sebaceous gland are present in the skin. If I just very roughly draw these hairs, very few hairs I am drawing, and there are so many hairs, just I have drawn the few hairs on the taking origin from the skin, okay, skin. Now this skin is adherent to the third layer, which is the epicranial aponeurosis, and I will use the green color to draw the epicranial aponeurosis, as it is made up of the dense connective tissue of the collagen bundle, okay. So this is the third layer which I am drawing here, and this is the common tendon of the occipitofrontalis muscle, to which we have called as the epicranial aponeurosis. And this diagram is a coronal section passing through the vault of the skull, along with the this scalp and the bones, okay, the two parietal bone, right and left. This is the right and this is the left parietal bone is cut in a coronal section. So this is the third layer, and third layer is the epicranial aponeurosis. Okay, it is a common tendon for occipital and frontal belly, which I will show you just now. Okay, so this is third layer. Let us come to the second layer. Okay, second layer. It is the second layer is called as superficial layer. This is called as superficial layer, and this layer consists of the dense connective tissue instead of the loose connective tissue as anywhere else in the body. This layer consists of the dense connective tissue, that is the fibrous band, okay, which are extending between the under surface of the skin to the superficial surface of the third layer, that is epicranial aponeurosis. That means the under surface of the skin with this fibrous strand is connected with that of the epicranial aponeurosis, or the third layer, which cannot be separated. It's firmly attached. It is firmly attached. Okay, now this extend between the skin and the epicranial aponeurosis, that is the third layer, which extend this fibrous band, and the nerves and blood vessels, they run through this second layer, that is superficial fascia. Similar to any other place in superficial fascia, there are the presence. I am just cutting the transverse section of the artery, but there may be longitudinal section of the artery and the vein, and this is yellow is the nerve. Okay, I will just draw the few nerves here. So the superficial fascia, or the second layer, is full of the nerve. In between the pockets of these strands, connective tissue strand, are the bundles of these fibers which are connecting the first layer with the third layer. There are the pockets of the fat also, okay, that is the adipose tissue, adipose. So between the fibrous strand, there are the adipose tissues are also present, and there are the veins. This I am drawing is the veins. There are the arteries, there are the nerves, which are just, I mean to say, present here, going to the skin from here. So this is the second layer, the superficial fascia. The third layer is an epicranial aponeurosis, which I said that it is a common tendon between the bellies of the frontal bellies and the occipital belly. Okay, let me draw the frontal belly and occipital belly of this muscle, which extend from the eyebrow. As I said that the anterior extent of the scalp, which is the soft tissue, it is going right up to the eyebrow. So this muscle takes origin from the skin of the eyebrow. It has no bony attachment, and this is the frontal belly. This is taking origin from the undersurface of the skin of the forehead, including that of the undersurface of the eyebrows, which lies superficial to that of the superciliary arches, which is nothing but the ridge above the superior orbital margin. Okay, so this is the belly, that is the frontal belly of right and left side. Hardly there is any gap, otherwise the medial margin of these two belly, they fuse with each other, and this flat muscle then covering to this skull will run backward. It runs backward from its origin side. This is the belly called as the frontal belly of the right and left side. So I am writing here as frontal belly of the occipitofrontalis muscle. It is written here, occipitofrontalis muscle, and this will just have an attachment to the epicranial aponeurosis. So I am just drawing the epicranial aponeurosis, and this I have drawn here in dotted line is that of the superior temporal lines on right. So it is limited between the superior temporal line of the right and the left side. This epicranial aponeurosis muscle will end here above the forehead, okay, just posterior to the forehead, and then this epicranial aponeurosis will go to get attachment onto that of the external occipital protuberance up to the superior nuchal line, and then the second belly, that is known as the occipital belly, this will arise from the lateral side of this highest nuchal line. Okay, there are two nuchal lines, superior and highest. So from the highest nuchal line, the two bellies, one on right side and another on left side, they will take origin from highest nuchal line and will have its insertion into that of the common tendon of insertion, which is quite flat, closely applied to the fourth and fifth layer, and this tendon of common insertion between occipital and frontal belly is called as the epicranial aponeurosis. So this is that epicranial aponeurosis. It is aponeurosis. It is epicranial aponeurosis is here, and this is frontal belly. This is occipital belly. But this occipital belly is smaller as compared to that of the frontal belly. So when they have a common tendon between the two muscles, when this muscle will contract, this will pull the aponeurosis or epicranial aponeurosis towards the front side, and when this occipital belly of right and left side they will contract, they will pull the aponeurosis on the back side towards the posterior aspect, because this is the anterior side of the head and this is the posterior, because external occipital protuberance is present here. This is the posterior side. So this is how the aponeurosis and the two bellies of the muscles are here, which is forming the third layer. But then we have learned that on the superior surface of this aponeurosis, there is the attachment of the strand of the fibrous tissue of the second layer, which is connecting the undersurface of the skin with the superficial surface of this epicranial. It means that the layer number 1 is skin, layer number 2 superficial fascia, and layer number 3, that is the epicranial aponeurosis, they are firmly attached to each other. That is the reason why these three layers, they act as a single layer, and then when the occipital belly or frontal belly is contracting, all three layers, they will move forwards or backward. Some of you may move your scalp by the contraction of the occipital and frontal belly. Okay, occipital. So you have seen the origin and insertion of these muscles and the presence of the common tendon Now let us go to the fourth layer, and the fourth layer is that of the loose areolar tissue. See this? This is the fourth layer. We will see here, this fourth layer is that of the loose areolar tissue, and I will just, with the yellow color, I will just form a loose areolar tissue which is very thin. The epicranial aponeurosis, okay, is directly touching to this bone and periosteum covering to the bone, that is the pericranium layer, that is the fifth layer, and there is a space, a very narrow space which is filled with the loose connective tissue. Hence the fourth layer is that of the loose, otherwise there is nothing. And from this fourth layer of the loose areolar tissue, emissary vein they pass. That means the vein which is present in second layer, okay, they will send its branch, its tributaries to that through the foraminas in bone, okay, of the vault of the skull, and then this vein may be in contact with the vein which are present within the cranial cavity, and those veins which connect the vein of the cranial cavity with that of the superficial vein outside the cranial cavity, they are called as emissary vein. So this fourth layer may be occupied by few emissary vein passing through this fourth. Otherwise there is nothing. Otherwise there is no blood vessel, there is no, except this emissary vein, and there is no nerve. Okay, there is no nerve. Let us come to the fifth layer. And the fifth layer is the pericranium. And this is the right and left parietal bone, and this is the sagittal suture in a coronal section. And pericranium is nothing but the periosteum. By this time you must be knowing what is the periosteum. It covers the bone from outer surface, and this periosteum through the suture, that is the sagittal suture, will go inside and will continue on the under surface of this parietal bone to form its periosteum from inner side, which is now called as endosteum. So there is a periosteum, and on the under surface of the bone is the endosteum. We don't bother about the endosteum, since this is the fifth layer of the scalp, but it is not movable because it is firmly fixed to that of the outer surface of those flat bone, frontal, parietal, and part of the occipital, I would say squamous part of the occipital. This is the bone marrow diploid, and these are the bones, okay, cortical bones of the parietal bone, okay, and this is in between is the bone marrow, which is called as diploid. So which are the five layers of the scalp? Skin, superficial fascia, epicranial aponeurosis, loose connective layer, and the pericranium. The fifth layer is the These are the five layers of the scalp, and I have told you the extent of this soft tissue, which is called as the scalp, to the different, anteroposteriorly and to the side. So now you have understood the layers of the scalp. Let us go. And you have also understood this occipitofrontalis muscle and how it forms a common tendon. Let us go to the blood supply. Okay, so we are on the blood supply of the scalp. I have just drawn a rough diagram from as seen from the top, the scalp. Okay, and these are the right and left ears, okay, which are shown in this. On the one diagram, I will show you the blood supply of the scalp. In the second diagram, I will show you the nerve supply of the scalp. But in the examination, you can show the blood supply on one side and nerve supply on the other side. Thus save your time, which will be spent in drawing the two diagrams. Okay, so on one of these simple diagram, you can show the presence of the blood supply with the various vessels. Let us see which are the vessels which will form, which will supply the arterial supply or the blood supply to that of the, scalp. We will just here learn about the arteries which lies in front of the ear, and then we will learn the arteries which lies behind the ear. Okay, on one side, the other side I am not going to draw. Okay, so see this, and I have already told you that arteries and veins and nerve, they are present in which layer? The second layer, superficial, and all of them, they are coming from periphery when they are running towards the center, that is towards the vault of the skull, top portion of the skull. They are coming from periphery and running upwards and towards the vault of the skull, okay, or the vertex, okay, towards the vertex, which is the highest point of the skull, okay, and these are coming and running in the second layer. Okay, let us see the arteries which are present in front of the ear. These are from anterior to posterior. I will keep on drawing. It is the supratrochlear artery. Supratrochlear is medial and supraorbital is the lateral artery. And this supratrochlear, let me write down, supratrochlear layer. This is called as supratrochlear because it comes out just above the trochlea, which is present in the superior orbital margin of the bone. And this is the orbital, okay, which comes through the notch or foramina at the superior margin of the orbit, okay. So this is the second supra. Both are the branches from where they are taking origin from the ophthalmic artery. They are taking origin from ophthalmic arteries, okay, right? So this is supratrochlear and supraorbital, okay. This ophthalmic is a branch from the internal carotid, okay. When it lies in the cranial cavity, just medial to that of the anteroclinoid process, it gives this branch, the ophthalmic branch, which runs through the optic canal and then comes into the orbit, and from orbit this supraorbital and supratrochlear, they come out of the orbit and supply the anterior part of the scalp. This may go quite backward also, okay. Then there is a third branch, and this is called as the superficial temporal, okay. This will, let me draw it with the red color. This is the superficial temporal branches, which comes in front of the ear, just in front of the ear, and this is the superficial temporal. Just I will write sup for superficial and temporal. And this superficial temporal is not the branch from the, this was from internal carotid. This is a branch from the external carotid. What? Superficial temporal is a branch, terminal branch of the external carotid artery. So this is internal carotid, and this is from the, and in the second layer they anastomose freely. All these branches, they will anastomose very freely within this second layer. So there is a communication or between the internal carotid and the external carotid branches, okay, in front of the ear, in front of the ear. Now this, that anastomosis is quite extensive, I said that, okay, and then this artery, they may bypass the blood supply to it, okay, bypass the arteries. Let us come to say behind the ear. Which are these arteries? It is the posterior auricular branch, okay. This will be the posterior, let me write, this was superficial temporal, and this is the posterior because it lies behind the auricle. Posterior auricular, okay, posterior auricular branch, okay. There will be one more, that is called as occipital arteries, okay, and this is quite large, okay, this is quite large, thick, okay, a very thick artery. The this is called as occipital artery. Occipital artery. Both posterior auricular and occipital, they are from the external carotid. External carotid. So how many branches are from external? Superficial temporal, posterior auricular, and occipital artery. They are the branches from the external carotid artery. And as I said, there is a free communication in the scalp. Scalp is very rich in blood supply. That you must have noticed, that if there is an injury on the soft tissue covering the skull, it bleeds profusely, okay. Now then comes to the veins, and veins, they are having, I mean to say, let me draw these veins. Veins are of the same names, and they run in opposite direction. They run in opposite direction, and they have the same name. They have the same name. Let us come in this diagram. I will show you the presence of the nerve supply. So our fifth point was the nerve supply of the scalp. Now are also profusely, scalp is profusely supplied by the nerve, and these nerves are both motor as well as sensory. I think I should use for the nerve some dark color, because this may not be seen, yellow color will not be seen. So just I will use the dark color for all sensory nerve. Let us come to see the sensory nerve which lies in front of the scalp. They lie in front of, not scalp, ear, sorry, in front of the ear. Again the same name, supratrochlear and supraorbital, coming along with the blood vessels. Okay, supratrochlear and supraorbital blood vessel. And they are again the branch from the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve. So this is the supratrochlear, supraorbital, okay, and both are from the ophthalmic division of the nerve, that is of the trigeminal nerve, which has three divisions: ophthalmic, maxillary, and the mandibular. So this part of the skin, sensory part, pain, touch, and temperature, they go through these two sensory nerve. Second sensory nerve, which is present, okay, which comes from the zygomatico foramina, and say from zygomatic bone or zygomatico, it is called as zygomatico temporal nerve. Okay, this is the zygomatico temporal nerve, and this zygomatico temporal nerve, it is again sensory nerve. All these black drawn nerves, they are sensory nerve. Okay, just remember that. And this branch comes from the maxillary nerve. So in the bracket I will write, as here I have written as ophthalmic. This is maxillary, branch from the maxillary nerve, second division of trigeminal. And then in front of the ear there will be one more sensory nerve, which will be called as the auriculotemporal nerve. So this will be the auriculotemporal, just like similar auriculotemporal artery. This will be the auriculotemporal. It will be called as auriculotemporal nerve, and this is branch now from the mandibular nerve. So all the three branches are represented in front of the ear: ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular. And there are three different branches. They will supply this part of the scalp in front of the ear. Okay, in front of the ear. Let us go to the sensory nerve behind the ear. And sensory nerve behind the ear are many. Okay, the great auricular nerve, okay, which will supply to the ear and scalp too. So this is the called as the great auricular because it is bigger. Great auricular to the ear, auricular, but it will also supply to the part of the scalp. And this is a branch coming from the ventral rami of C2 and C3. C2 and C3, ventral rami. Just remember, ventral ramus and dorsal ramus of a typical spinal nerve, though it is supplying behind the ear, but it is ventral ramus still. Then another branch which will be here, that is called as the lesser occipital nerve. Okay, this is called as lesser occipital, again from the C2 and C3. That means they are coming from cervical plexus, and this is called as lesser occipital. Lesser occipital nerve. All are sensory, pain, touch, and temperature. And then there will be two more nerve here, which one is called as the greater occipital, and is quite thick. The greater occipital nerve is quite thick, and it will supply. This is called as the greater occipital. So lesser ke piche greater, okay, greater occipital, which will supply the occipital region, the skin covering to the occipital bone. But this is not from the ventral rami, not from the cervical plexus. It is coming from the dorsal rami of C2. It is coming from dorsal rami of C2, and there is one more small nerve which will be here, and this is called as, again it is from the dorsal rami of C3, and this nerve is called as the third occipital. Third occipital, and takes origin from the dorsal ramus of the third cervical spinal nerve. Dorsal ramus of the third cervical spinal nerve. So these are all the cervical, I mean say sensory nerve very profusely. Imagine that they are coming from opposite side also, not only from one side, the same they are coming. So it is very richly. Similarly, the blood supply was also very rich, because the other side artery will also come and they will just anastomose with the arteries of the opposite side also. Similarly, there are the nerves. Now, but what we have left here is the another kind of the nerve, which are the motor nerve, and for this I think I will use this yellow color. Let me see if you will be able to see or not this yellow color. Okay, so what are the motor nerve? One nerve is present in front of the ear, another nerve is present behind the ear. So the motor nerve which is in front of the ear, it is the temporal branch of the facial nerve. See this nerve, just I am drawing, okay, and I hope that you are seeing. This is the temporal branch of the facial nerve. Temporal branch of facial nerve, and this facial nerve is the seventh cranial nerve. It is the seventh cranial nerve. After coming from stylomastite foramina, this branch comes out, temporal branch of facial nerve, which runs towards the frontal valley of the occipitofrontalis, and the motor supply of the frontal valley of the occipitofrontalis is the temporal branch of the facial nerve. So this is the only motor nerve in front of the ear. Then there will be another nerve behind the ear which will come out. Okay, this is called as posterior auricular. Don't confuse it with the greater auricular. This is the posterior auricular nerve. And this is again the branch from the facial nerve, seventh cranial nerve. Okay, after coming out from the stylomastite foramina. And this nerve is going to supply the occipital belly of the occipitofrontalis. That means a single muscle, occipital belly and frontal belly, both are supplied by the seventh cranial nerve, the motor supply. So this is the posterior auricular. Posterior auricular. Okay, now it is the name of the nerve, and same name was there, posterior auricular, of the artery and veins which were behind the ear. Similarly, it is the same name is there for the motor branch of the facial nerve. Posterior auricular branch is given, and it will supply to that of the occipital belly of the occipitofrontalis. Okay, now this completes your question. What was the question? Question was that describe the scalp under following heads. I have told you about the introduction. We'll have defined the definition of the scalp, that is soft tissue covering to the vault or the skull cap. It extends anteroposteriorly and it's on the lateral side. There are 5 layers in the scalp. It is supplied by many blood vessels and many nerves. In the next short video, I am going to explain you about the applied importance of the scalp, which is very important. Thank you very much for watching this video.